Get that done. I wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm Rebecca Straley, Michael Straley. We've been with PWAR for probably 6-7 years, although I have been with many of the associations as a broker, but I'm not broker anymore. I get to be team lead teacher, and so this is really fun. It's got a new excitement for me in the business. We all go through those cycles, and this is a great one. So Name That Price is, we also teach pricing strategies here at PWAR. And so we're going to play a little game for starters. Want to introduce yourself, Michael?
Yes, I'm Michael Straley, as Rebecca said, and we are going to have some fun today. We're going to have a little game show action here with Name That Price, Get It Sold. Does anybody remember one of those game shows that was named sort of like this?
Price is Right.
Oh, The Price is Right is the one I was thinking of, but this is...
they got trademarks on that, so we can't do that.
Name That Tune.
Name That Tune. So I think I'm going to scan around the audience here. I think almost everybody here may have watched Name That Tune, but we may have David. I don't know. I'm going to check you out. You never saw that? I'm not sure. I think it ran into the late 90s or early 2000s, didn't it? Well, here we go. Here we go. Here's what it looks like for all you guys that never had the chance to do that.
That one is from the late 70s, early 80s, do you think? So, Name That Tune is kind of like naming the price. You know, people want you to do it in how many seconds when you go on your listing appointment.
$100,000 Name That Tune. Today, we're going to play for 50 cents. Okay? Sorry, we're not quite to the 100 grand level yet. And so we have Penelope Price It Right, and my name is Mark It Maker. Okay, how about that? We're going to play a little bit of Name That Price today, not Name That Tune. So it goes like this. This is how it works. They would say, I can name that tune in 3 notes.
If you know the tune, stand up, shout it out.
Whoever knows this, stand up.
What?
Shaggy, and what's the name of the song?
Call me.
It wasn't me. Hey, David, 50 cents. All right, we have a winner already. There we go. Here we go. Number 2. Okay, couldn't hear that one. I'm going to turn it up a little bit.
Oh, now we know the answer. Everybody gets it. Stand up.
We got another one. Outcast. Hey, ya.
Who got that? Stand up.
All right.
You get the $50 piece.
Okay, so we'll make do with this a little bit more later, but today we're going to name that price. Now that the fun is over on the game show, we're going to have our own game show with Name That Price. How many people love pricing real estate? I mean, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. We got some lovers in here. That's awesome. Okay, good news.
About 10% is what we normally find. 10% love pricing, but it's all of our jobs. And the National Association of Realtors says that is what the clients want most from us, and what we expect is to name the price and name it correctly. But it's not, they can name it, we can name it. It's not about us or them. What's it about?
The market says.
The market. It's what the market says. And so we're going to investigate that a little bit here.
So let me ask in the audience, since this is a game show, and you guys are the audience, so who out there has a good strategy for earning your percentage, saving your client their percentages in regards to pricing? Remember, we have money to give out today.
So you mean like your crushing value proposition?
Yeah, like your value proposition with pricing. Any volunteers in the audience?
How do you know you
So who
nailed
loves to
that
overprice a listing? Who overprices listings here? Anybody?
Sometimes.
Okay, so overpricing It's not the best strategy, I would say, right? So what about pricing to market? Is that a strategy? Who likes that one? Anybody? Somebody's got to say
I
yes.
don't know, I think it's after lunch.
I know. Okay, so if you price to market, guess what happens to the days on market? They go down, right?
Price goes up, the days go down.
I try to go a little lower to get a little competition.
Okay, a little lower. That's a strategy. Okay, so competition
50
strategy.
cents.
50 cent.
Yeah.
50 cent. I'm going to go with the 50 cent.
Right at your table.
Singular, 50 cent. Okay, so there are strategies. So basically what you're employing is the urgency factor. And then, like, how many times have you used that, and what have been your results?
What's your name?
It's Renata.
Renata said that sometimes she prices it just on the tip or a little bit lower to build the competition.
We get more people in and then they start betting each other out.
Okay.
And we get a higher price anyway.
So then they're not, we love this because then they're not even negotiating with the seller anymore, right? They're negotiating against
Each other,
the other buyer.
buyer to buyer.
So, but you still have to know market price in order to employ that strategy. Otherwise, you wind up with a strategy that's called too low, right? And then you lose money for your clients. So you have to be actually more in tune with the market to employ that strategy, correct? You agree with that?
Yep.
Definitely. So we got a market. We call Renata. We call you a market maker. Okay, when you know the market that well that you can make a market.
So we
good
love
job.
being realtors, but Michael's
Market maker.
thinks that we should be verbs also. And so
wanna be a
being
verb.
a market maker. And he actually just put that license plate on his card today, so that'll
Yeah, so
be
nobody can have it
kind of
now.
fun. But we are market makers.
Just
We are
got it
making the
yesterday.
market by creating competition.
Any other great strategies in the audience for earning that money that they pay us? So we have one called test market. Want to talk about that one, Rebecca?
Well, the test market is kind of in the vein of overpricing, where somebody just wants a little bit more. We've all heard that. I just would like to get a little bit more. So rather than committing to that price that we make an agreement, because we're not in agreement in accordance with the market, then we call it a test market. And we really recommend, for your protection and for your client's protection, that when you do a CMA and you give them a price range, that you have your client initial that you have gone overpricing, because we can get in trouble just as much for underpricing as for overpricing, so we want to be careful. So if we call it a test market and we label it that we're going to test at this price, that's very good for your protection, and yet it gives your client that opportunity to possibly get a little bit more, because the market is a variable.
Right, so the beautiful part about that is, first of all, we all know that real estate is a unique commodity. That's why we have a job. If it was easy, then they wouldn't need us. So this unique commodity, trading in that marketplace, can be a very complex thing. So the test market strategy, what it employs is, I'm sorry, is it a little ring going on?
Is that me?
I'm not sure. You might need to step away.
Step away.
Step away.
He tells me that
Step away, Rebecca.
every time, right after dinner. Step away.
No, I said go over to do the dishes. Guess who winds up doing that? So the test market, the beautiful part about it is if they really believe that their property is going to price in that range, even though it suggests it's above market, suggests it's above possible appraisal value, is you say, we will do the test market, but we'll take a retainer that's non-refundable. And that really makes them think. Now, the good part about it is we will give them that test market fee back at closing. Okay? Now, if they fire us and blame the market on us, we keep the money. Pretty nice. Now, most of the time, this is like those things where I'll buy your house, those schemes. So this is like one of those things where normally when they get this option, we say, yeah, sure, we'll go ahead and price your property at that. But when there's money on the line, they normally, 99% of the time, they'll go ahead and price their home at market. Or they will say, here's the door, I'll hire the next person, and what you then do is try to keep that relationship with them. So sometimes it's better being the second realtor. Wouldn't you agree? Excellent.
I
So
would agree.
that's a strategy to earn percentages and get them to market.
So we're going to earn percentages for our clients and for ourselves. Because often, if we price it right, we're going to get a little bit more than someone that doesn't price it right, and therefore it's really not costing them anything because we're earning our commissions, and by providing them competitive market, as Renata said, and higher pricing.
Yeah, so congrats. Hey, David, give her another 50-cent piece, because I do believe that the highest prices are achieved through competitive.
So Michael, how's the market? That is the big thing that I hear. Usually in the grocery store, that's probably your most dangerous place to be talking about the market. And so you have to be very careful that you understand what you're saying, and implied agency you want to be careful of. So when you're talking about market, it used to be taught when the Tommy Hopkins days, because I've been in real estate for several decades, that the safe answer is unbelievable. The market's unbelievable. And the reason is because it could be unbelievably good or unbelievably bad. You don't really have to know what you're talking about. But today, people expect more of us. And so, go ahead, Michael.
Whoa. First, let's go. This is a game show, so we have to poll the audience. When somebody asks you this, what's your best? Let's get some nuggets from the audience.
How about this table?
You've
How's
heard it
the
before.
market? Benita, how's the market?
Great.
Great market. And then what do they say? Great. Great. Okay.
Jason, how's the market?
How's the market? Opportunistic for sellers, and
I like
there's an
that.
opportunity for me there. Beautiful. Okay.
Right. I'm going to take 50 cents and give it to you so you can give it to Jason. I like that. Opportunistic. That's one I haven't heard. Catch.
Awesome.
All right.
And
So our answer is which market? Okay, and so the reason why we do this is it starts a dialogue. And then they say,
What do you mean?
And it starts a conversation. And that conversation then says, I normally say, depending on the county that you're in, I usually say, well, there's 5 markets in Stafford County. Which one are you talking about? And they'll go, well, I don't know, what about the townhouse market? And so then I'll tell them, well, there's about depending on the time right now, I think it's maybe about a 1-month supply in townhouses, but a couple months ago it was 2 weeks. Okay, so it's changed. Okay, now it's a 1-month supply, but if you go into the estate category, maybe 500 to 700, which is that category in Stafford, then you may be looking at a 6 to 9 month supply of inventory, completely different markets in the same county. So you got to know which market. And so then that starts a great dialogue, and that conversation can go on as long as you want, actually.
so that's the number one thing I want you to remember today for your listing appointments or the grocery store line is which market, because it is going to make a significant difference in the client's point of view, and it's something that you don't hear very often in your listing appointments is breaking it down. It's something that we do instinctually. We have it up here, but we need to start getting it out here, and then be quiet enough after we say which market, we talk about it, that we give the client time to digest what we're saying, because we've done the studies. We know where we're going with this conversation, but we have to let them internalize what we're saying, and to understand which market is a very big part, because everybody listens to the news, and that's a national market, and that really often has very little to do with the seller selling his property.
Fake news.
Fake news.
But even your local newspapers, so they will usually accumulate the data into a summary, and then your clients or customers read that, and when they read that, then they think that's the market.
So what we do is stratified grouping. And so this is something that you want to look at, and we're talking about language today, so we want to remember our words as we go through the day. Stratified grouping. Are we talking about your market, the competitor's market? Are we talking about national, local? Are we talking about this community that is new home build? And so even as far as the unfinished basement, you can really go down that stratification of a particular neighborhood, unfinished basements. What's that market like? And so as you stratify, and this gives you the conversation, which is what our clients want now. They don't want us to tell them that everything's going to be okay. We're going to get your house sold. I'm going to sell it for the most. And they go, well, why? How do I know? And I go, because I've been doing this for decades. I know. You know, and that's what we used to say. And they used to, because we had the information and they do not, that was acceptable at that time. But now they want to be partners with you. So you have to have this conversation as we go through the process. And looking at the stratification and taking them deeper and deeper, then they start realizing that there's more to pricing than what you say or what I say or what they feel.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned the unfinished basement scenario. Anybody sell homes in 22405, the zip code? Zip code 22405 anywhere?
There's one in the back.
Okay, a couple. So last year I did a study when I had a home that had an unfinished basement in 22405, and I looked at all the sales, and basically 90% of them that were selling were finished basements. And so my listing had an unfinished basement, so what I delivered to the seller was the tough market of unfinished basements, because everything else, all the unfinished basements had high days on market. And so you just make your seller aware that this is a tough market for an unfinished basement, which is a stratification of the market. And then you create a strategy with that. So the strategy, one thing they did was painted the basement floor with a nice finish. That was one little strategy, and actually we sold fairly shortly thereafter, just by trying to doctor it up a little bit to make it feel a little bit better.
You know what this reminds me of? I just came up with my aha moment, and that's one reason why we like sharing and doing these classes, is because each time we do this, we go like something new happens to us too. It's almost like those overlays where you could peel back like on the map. So this is the national market, this is the neighborhood or the county market, then the neighborhood, and then the unfinished basements. So there's two things that we're looking at. We're looking at the market, and then in relationship to the market, we're looking at condition. Those are the two variables that we need to evaluate when we're talking pricing. And so Michael likes to talk about it as dressing for the dance.
So if I'm gonna go like this. Rebecca, I would like to go to the dance, but I'm gonna wear dungarees. Is that okay?
Yeah, you can drive. I'll take my car.
So you won't dance with me if I'm in dungarees?
Not me.
Okay.
No, I will. It depends on the dance. If we go to Rick's, right, then of course.
Okay, all right. But a formal dance?
Plus I got the ring, so
Okay.
I kind of got to.
So think about it this way. If people go to a formal dance, very few people dress down for that dance. Well, these people are sellers, we call them our sellers, that don't have their homes prepared for the dance. It's crazy. This is their biggest asset. And you train them to dress for the dance, because they won't get the dance if their condition is not what the market expects. And the market today expects that you know how to put your house, your property, in great condition. So we just say dress for the dance. They get it. And actually we just finished one. We went live today, so a little plug. We have one down in Spotsylvania, and they spent about 3 weeks dressing for the dance, and we went live this morning. And it's looking pretty.
When you're talking to your sellers, I really like choosing words that are visual. Because when we talk in CMA, what's a CMA? Well, that's comparative market analysis. Or, then it gets so technical, it doesn't ring true with their love for their home. So when we can talk in visual words like dressing for the dance, and most of us have gone to a prom or had a daughter or son or a brother that went to the prom, so it kind of puts it in, oh, that makes sense to me, and it's not just criticizing and saying like we need to fix up that mantle place, or we need to reduce the furniture. So start with something that becomes emotional, because people make their decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. And so using the visual words as often as we can in appointments is something that's very nice. I really like this, Michael. Good job.
Thank you. So at this point, I would like to get rid of one word that we use in real estate. It's one of my pet peeves, and the word is, you know what it is, Rebecca? Feedback. I can't stand feedback.
Well, you got feedback. If you step
I gotta figure out. See, it's like a thing for
that
me.
way.
I can't go any further. My leash. This is my leash here. Let me see. Hang on. My leash just got longer. So it took us 3 months to change the word feedback, and you guys are used to feedback, right? Who, you know, after that showing, what's the feedback? And so it drove us nuts, because they would tell us, I don't like the carpet color, blah, blah, blah. I want to know why your buyer did not buy my listing. And that's called insight. So we replaced the word feedback with insight. And if it's the carpet, then great, we'll switch the carpet. Okay, what's next? No, that's it. That's the only thing wrong. Okay, consider it done. Make an offer. Okay, that's the difference between feedback and insight. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to have carpet that looks like you ate breakfast on it, right? We want to dress for the dance, get rid of that carpet. Feedback is horrible carpet, but will you buy this house if I replace it as insight? Is that good?
Which we did have that listing that hadn't sold for a short period of time, but it was longer than the sellers wanted. And we had some people that were interested that had looked at it. And so Michael called them up for insight and said, what do I have to do to this house to make you buy it? To 3 different people. Wasn't that pretty fantastic? And so one needed a fence because they were afraid the soccer ball would fall off the cliff in the back. What was the other one that they wanted?
I was quite shocked by the
That
whole thing.
everybody came up with an answer on what we could do that they would consider buying that house.
Yes.
Which then created the competition or not.
Yeah, the one was funny. I like to have fun in real estate. Who likes to have fun in real estate? I mean, we can have some fun here. So the one that said the soccer balls are going to go down the hill, my joke was, well, I'll buy you 50 soccer balls. So if you lose a few, I'm like going, okay, I can probably get them down at 5 and below for $5, right? 50 times 5, you know, that's not too bad. I was willing to absorb that expense. And then they said, well, that's silly. And I said, well, we'll put a fence around it so they will.
We'll consider putting the fence around it.
I told him, well, Rebecca teaches me to say consider, but I said, I'll put a fence around there. I like to be definite like that. And so they basically said, okay, and they went back to their client and they started talking to them about that, because I had 5 people interested, but nobody was writing an offer. And so the second one was said, well, we need some trees or some bushes around that above ground peat septic system. My wife can't stand it. And I said, done. We can get that done by tomorrow.
So we went through all 5 of these buyers, and the sellers were considering it, and it looked like we were getting pretty close to contract. But in the meantime, somebody else walked in with no appraisal contingency and like all cash or close to that, and boom, it went away.
Stole it away from the other 5.
Creating that interest and looking for insight rather than feedback was a great pricing strategy.
So the funniest part about that story was then one of the 5 came back after it was under contract. We all get this and said, can I still get the house? And I'm like, well, we can accept a backup offer, but too late, too late.
So the USDE is an appraisal term, and it's very important. And with the pricing strategies, what we have to do is blend the language. We were talking about the language with the client through the listing and pricing and into the contract and the appraisal. So we want to be very careful and understand and maybe upgrade some of our words that we use into the appraisal language, especially when speaking with an appraiser. I have to give a little bit of a commercial here because Michael is in the Realtor University, and when you're in your Realtor University and you're close to graduating, which he is, they make you ambassadors, and so you have to start talking about it all around town. So there is a scholarship for a Realtor University, and it's a wonderful thing. You work with the people that are the best in the nation. And so he was taking this appraisal class. And
Really difficult.
And I was an appraiser for 20 years. I'm going, I know that. But you want to open your book and show like all the...
Let's see. So I'm gonna save the book for one of the other big moments here of some of the words, but I'll show you. So these are what I call my aha moments. I'm going to put the mic down. So these are all the things that I learned. Now we have a slide on that showing this, but I've been in real estate for quite a while, and when I read this book, these are all the new things that I learned, and I was just shocked at how much there is, how much depth there is to, and this is all about pricing. And so when you learn the foundation of pricing, then you become very powerful. You get a USP that cannot be taken away from you as a realtor, and no AVM, and we'll get to that in a minute, no AVM can take that away from you.
So the second thing I would like you to do today, if you would write it down, is call an appraiser. We should all have appraiser friends. We should answer the appraiser calls because they're sitting there working on their computer. And can you imagine that we do, like, what is it, 18, 30 pages? I'm not sure what the appraisal report ends up being right now. But we expect it to be done without a single error, not even a typo, you know? And if they make it 500 square feet instead of 575, we go like, oh my gosh, how could you do that? You know, and so it's very important that we listen to the appraisers and talk to the appraisers and pull this together. It's actually the biggest myth out there in real estate and in the National Association of Realtors is really pushing for us to encourage and to inspire our relationships with the appraisers. Appraisers and realtors, we do need to talk to each other. We are market builders, and so it was a myth when they stopped where the appraisers went into a rotation. They actually couldn't talk to lenders, but they can talk to realtors. And it is our duty in representing our clients to make sure we do the very best we can. So USDE.
I want to spend a little bit more time on this because it did change my life. So this equation, the USDE, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. This is actually in the brain of our buyers. And this is something that has to be attended to by the sellers. So I'm going to step through these, and the utility is basically, this is what we call marketability, and so the way we say it is we put a dash in there. Market dash ability. And so this one, you could almost use this singularly. So if there's no other takeaway from today, you could use this when I explain it to you to determine how a property is going to fare on the market. And so the buyer that's going through all these homes with you, they have this equation going on. And so they go into the home and they say, what is the utility going to be of this home? Which means day to day, how is it going to fit the life of my family? How am I going to be able to dress the kids? How am I going to be able to put the lunch boxes places? How much pantry space do I have? All these different utilitarian features that will determine the life of how you're going to live in the property. And so they have that. They have a big equation. So we call that a high or low U. If they don't have a high utility factor, then the buyer is going to register that in their brain and say that's a low utility. Then you get to desirability, which is going to be like, does it have granite countertops? Does it have the stainless? These things that I would love to have, but it doesn't really change the function of the property. And so they have this little register, and each home will have either a high D or a low D or a neutral D. And the buyers are going to register that also. Scarcity, they're going to basically determine, can I find this property like this, a substitute for this property somewhere else? And if they can't, then they're going to have a high scarcity value on it. Then it all comes down to the economic purchasing power, is whether they can afford it. This equation is happening in every one of your buyers' brains, and they're going to be looking at every property that's unique, and they're going to be scoring it based on these things. If you start communicating with them in these factors, then it'll help you. Now, from a listing perspective, what's great about it is when you start scoring your listings on this, you can help your clients change these factors. So when we say dress for the dance, for example, the desirability, and sometimes even the utility, you can drive that up by doing the right preparation. We'll change the whole market ability of that property.
So using this form is a visual, and it helps kind of clear out in their brain. We used to do the the T-square that Ben Franklin did, the pros and the cons. But sometimes that's not good enough when you're comparing so many unique possibilities in multiple properties and you're trying to best represent the property. Then you can use these, saying, especially the scarcity we often use with the inventory, that it has a high scarcity. With the economic power, we want to talk about, is this home good for only cash buyers? Can it go VA, FHA? You know, the wider the berth and the wider the pyramid is of the buyers that may be able to purchase that property. So you want to look at the economic power also. But does everybody like this as a visual or breaking it down like that? If I could get some ahas or hand raises, if you think you might be using this idea.
I got a wonderful back there somewhere. Hey, get that lady
A 50 cent.
All right, David. Here we go. We got a wonderful. Mrs.
Did you have a
Wonderful.
question, Renata?
The desk.
So this USDE, scarcity and desirability is switched around on that from the other slide that I have. So USDE, utility, scarcity, desirability, and economic power.
Good catch, Renata. Give her another one. She's gonna be rich.
She's gonna buy her drinks on you.
$1.50 drinks on Renata.
So the further back you look, the further forward you can see. And said by Winston Churchill, and it kind of is talking about the appraisers and the realtors. So appraisers are always looking historically. They're not really looking at our current market. They're looking further back. They're looking at what has sold, what is actual. If we want the best market indicator, it would be what's under contract, but we just have a hard time unless we have people agents that talk too much and tell us what the contract price was, which you can ask agents, and sometimes it's to their benefit to release the contract price, but you always, if you do offer that to someone else, always get the permission of your client to release that contract price. But have you ever been in a situation where you're wondering who's going to go for the appraisal first? Yeah. And if they get it, then I'm good, or if I get it. And so sometimes you can work together on that. So the further back you look is where the appraiser does. They do historical. The current market is the best, most accurate, but then what we do is we look forward and we try to trend and anticipate. And so we're looking at numbers, and what we're going to look at now is some statistical information that would help us trend, because we're going to try to look to the future. And we want to know if it's going up or if it's going down, because I remember 10 years ago, we had to make sure that people got ahead of the market because it was going down, and if they followed it rather than following up, their price was going down, 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 down.
Yeah, I'll never forget, I got into, I think I might have caused the real estate abyss, because the day I got my license in 2005, everything started going down. But I didn't know anything, so I was a data analyst by old trade.
Michael, you got to step back.
Yeah, I'm trying. Let's see. How's that?
That, perfect.
I'm gonna stand over here. Does that bother you? So I started watching inventory, and I started asking, this was back in 2005, and I was asking a lot of realtors, what's the normal inventory? And nobody was answering me. And I'm like, well, I'm watching the number of homes on the market, and it seems to be going up fairly rapidly. And so I think back then it was in the Stafford marketplace. I remember seeing active properties in the tune of like 1,600 or 1,700. Back at the peak, and I said, this can't be good. So I did get into the listing scenario at that point, and I basically told my clients, I don't think this is going to be good for your pricing, so why don't you be first? And so the ones that listened did thank me, because we all know what happened after that.
And that was the anticipation of what will happen next.
So that started my career in real estate, looking at data, and began in 2005 when I really did not, even though I was an analyst by trade in the old days, I did not understand the real estate market. And so just been accumulating that ever since, and fortunate enough to be here today.
And we have to be anticipatory, and that's part of the partnership that our clients are looking for us now, is because they want to know, they have information, they just don't know how to analyze it, and they're analyzing it for anticipatory reasons. What will I anticipate? Should I sell now, or should I sell in the springtime? And so we're going to take a look at that. Can I talk about it now?
Can talk about it now, but one of the things I used that for, we had a bet to see who was going to talk the most today. We always have that trouble. But one of the things we used this anticipation for is, there were like, I think it was 3 years in a row, I think I might have missed last year, but we ratified contracts on New Year's Eve. Makes for a heck of a celebration, by the way. But when there's low inventory, meaning low number of homes active on the market, and you have a great property at market price within a low inventory market, we all know that your odds of going under contract are quite nice. And so it's beautiful when you get those year-end contracts when people are thinking that, hey, nothing happens during this time. Well, it's not true.
So inventory. Inventory is the third thing that I want you to consider today, talking about at listing appointments or delving into more deeply yourselves, as Michael was talking about in 2005 as he was looking around and talking to people. A lot of people didn't know what the inventory was. And then you don't only want to know what the inventory is in the county, but also in your farm, in your market area, in your neighborhood. And so you do want to be the market expert. But the inventory, I think, is the #1 indicator for pricing and for selling. And do you want to explain that and go through it? And how do you do that as you're working with sellers and buyers?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up subdivision, because one of the properties we had this year that sold fairly briskly was a neighborhood that was in high demand, and the purchaser had been looking in that neighborhood for 2 years. And so they looked at everything that came available in that neighborhood. Now, when you know these kind of things about a certain subdivision, you can use that to your advantage. And so we actually did a Renata on this one, and we had two, well, that'll be a new phrase here. How do you spell Renata?
R-E-N-A-T-E.
A-T-E.
Okay, all right. I want everybody to remember that. We're going to do a Renata, okay? And that's a wonderful way to get multiple buyers interested. And so we do, when you do the study of stats, you can see there's a lot of homes that are selling at list price, and especially when they're in an area with great demand and low inventory. And don't forget to look at the history of that particular subdivision, because that subdivision will, if it's limited supply, and when a new property comes available, there may be people that have been stalking that subdivision for quite a long time, and use that information, and then look on the days on the market of when they do come available, and then use the USDE to do an overlay. I love the way you said that, Rebecca. Do an overlay on that and grade whether the properties that came available were actually desirable or not. Did they have high utility? And if they didn't, then you can kind of disqualify that one and still interpret what the market is going to be in that subdivision.
So the first part of the formula is to know how many homes are on the market now. So let's say, you know, we're looking at a particular subdivision and there's 10 homes on the market. 10 active listings.
In this one we have an example here of, I used this year, I think the date is current, right? I was using it during the summer, and we sold a property. We actually utilized this to we were under contract. Well, I mean, we actually received an offer. And so what I wanted to do was illustrate to the client. So you don't only use this during the buying and selling process, you do it when you have an offer. So I wanted to illustrate to them how many contracts they may expect in a certain period of time. And so what that was able to do was to illustrate to them that there was a high inventory market, meaning, let's say, for example, we're looking at in Spotsy, we're looking at during these certain months in this stratified market of 500 to 600K, we're looking at, let's say, where are we at over there? So May and June, we saw 8 contracts and 7 contracts in that time frame. So I'm on the far right-hand side of the graph. And then we look backwards, just like Winston Churchill said, and we looked at how many contracts occur in certain months, and we can see a trend dipping down into the November, December, January, February timeframe. So you tell your client, okay, if we don't take this offer, I just want to set expectations, which is what we call anticipatory real estate. I want to set expectations that we're going to have less visits, we're going to have less offers. We should really look at the credentials of the offer that's on the table, unless you're willing to go through that period of time, which could be 4 or 5 months, which then could cause you to be a languishing listing, which would mean you could spend more money or lose more money on that and spend more money on your mortgage. And when you start negotiating in that fashion with them for their own good, then fortunately we ratified the contract. It looked a lot more pretty, dressed for the dance type of contract, and we got it ratified.
So if there's 10 contracts, 10 houses on the market right now, and over the last 3 months there have been 30 homes sold over the last 3 months. That would be 1 month's worth of inventory. Because you take 30 contracts over the past 3 months, divided by 3, that means 10 houses are selling every month if nothing new came on. And so we have 10 houses on the market right now, so our predictability would be that all 10 houses, if priced right, would sell this month. So if your seller says is now a good time to sell, and you look at the inventory, look at the last 3 months and how many contracts went each month, then you'd say, darn right, this is a great time to sell. Not just saying now, you're not just saying, oh, it's unbelievable out there, that you're actually giving good data and for their best interest. And of course, they always make the choice. Maybe they want to wait till springtime then.
Okay, this is the game show. On Rebecca's last scenario, how many months supply of inventory? We got a 5 over here. I hear 5. Anybody else? 50 cents, David, to the 5 man.
David didn't know.
All right, here we go. Another winner. So that was fast. He didn't even hesitate. He had one of those brains.
So do you use that in your listing appointments? Do you use the inventory?
I'm an appraiser, and I appreciate everything you said about appraisers.
Oh,
Yay! We got an appraiser in the house. Hey, are you a plant? Are you a plant? Okay, all right. Okay. I'm going to keep my eyes over here now. Okay. We're on watch, Rebecca.
Yeah, so it's really important. So we, as a real estate agent, and over the decades, I've learned that we have to manage our time and we have to make our own policies to stay in business. And so I say no phone calls after 7 o'clock, and we're really not going to do anything, or no phone calls during dinner at our home. But Michael goes, oh, but it's an appraiser, and he runs away from dinner and goes to talk to them because he just knows how valuable that is to our marketplace.
And let me describe this a little bit. If you guys don't get this, you know this. When you're in the middle, you know James Patton? Appraiser, James Patton. Anybody have James Patton? We have see a few. So I was driving down Kellogg Mill Road, and James Patton comes up on the phone, and I did have hands-free, but just for disclosure purposes. And so what I did was I saw James Patton call, and so I definitely picked up, and he was appraising a property. He's right in the middle of it, right? You're always right in the middle of it, aren't you, when you make those phone calls? And so I was, I didn't have a lot of time, but I realized, hey, he has something important to ask me, and he's right in the middle of it. And so I answered the call, helped him out, and actually in that case there was a sale that he didn't know about because he was calling me on one of my listings that had sold, but then I used some most similar substitutes on mine, and I gave him not only details on mine, but another one that he was able to utilize in what he was working on. But when you're right in the middle of it, if I would have not picked up his call, he basically said to me, well, I got to get this done by like 5. And so if I wouldn't have picked up that call, then he would have been on with it, right? Wouldn't have mattered. And so that's why I understand what they go through, and that's why I pick up their calls like no tomorrow.
So studying appraisals, talking to your appraiser. Hopefully all of you will call one appraiser that you might have in your phone this afternoon and come up with a question and just say, I was in this pricing class today, and I want to know what are some of the questions that we might ask.
We have one coming up.
Oh, you wrote it on the computer?
Rebecca suggested
He's
it
way
this
ahead of
morning.
me.
On the fly, I added it, so we're good.
Okay.
We have it coming up. But
So,
this,
we talked about the book, and this is kind of an aha moment to write all your favorite pages right in the front of the book, so you can look up what you're looking for rather than flipping through all those folded pages. This is the appraisal book.
yeah, so this is the USDE on page 183. So if you guys want to, if anybody wants to come up and look at the book afterwards, this changed my whole real estate perspective. One of the ones I love the most is on page 299. And what was your name again, sir? James. So James would know this. It's like basically a buyer will pay a higher price when there's lack of suitable substitutes, okay? And so that's what makes a market go up, okay? One of the questions that we'll have here later will be related to that, but this is basically when you speak the language of lack of suitable substitutes, and that was something that you probably just have embedded in your brain. We have to start learning to speak that is already in the brains of appraisers and learn how to supply what we want to call it, Rebecca, objective information to them.
And so what we want to develop, and this is what the pricing strategy class speaks of, which is going to be next week here at PWAR, is processes and systems using objective facts. So feelings don't matter. When I first got my real estate, like my appraisal license, or I was apprentice to get, it's the hardest license to get. Is it still 2,000 hours of apprenticeship? And so I was writing, and everything had to be signed off by my supervising appraiser. And so I wrote in my comments that this was a very beautiful large acre. And it was. And I got called into the office, and he goes, Rebecca, how big is an acre? I was so proud because I knew the answer because I studied 43,560 square feet. And he goes, so how could it be very large? You know, this is the size of an acre. And so we have to go away from our realtor talk that it's a big, beautiful acre. What I really meant was it had good utility because it was flat and all usable. But so we get away from our realtor talk and we have to get into our factual, objective material. And we're going to develop our processes and our systems. And here's just some ideas.
Before you move on, go back to that. Go back to that. One of my favorites. So, you want to tell them the effective age story?
No, we don't have time because we're running out of time.
Okay. All right. If
You can
anybody
say
wants
that.
to hear that one, you can join us in PSA
Or you can
next
text
week.
Michael. It's
Text
all about me. It's a compliment for me. So I have a good effective age. I'll just tell you that.
What does roof color have?
Pardon me?
Roof color.
color.
Oh, roof color?
Go back to your highlighted.
Is that?
Roof color. Roof color.
310. Page 310.
I don't actually remember, so after this, why don't we go
Well, look it up.
page
There's the
310 and
book.
figure out what
Look
the
it up.
heck that is. It was something good.
Okay.
So Michael has written a short essay, maybe a page or two, that we put on our blog. You can take a picture of this if you want. If you just search that Go Straley group, Finding Nemo, it's him talking about pricing.
Yeah, and it's about, one of my pet peeves is that they call an appraisal an opinion of value. And it's not an opinion of value, and if you read this, you'll understand why that's true.
So it's the process of coming to an opinion of value. So top 10 words you have to know. We're gonna, I have a handout, or if you hand me your card, then I will email you for the definitions of these. Some of the things we've talked about is the seasonality, stratification, inventory. We all love ratification. We all know that one. Market maker, the market, learning our statistics, but equilibrium. This is a really fun one that I did not specifically know that Michael brought into our classes now and brought into my mind, which I find particularly amazing.
Okay, so I'm my geek.
Just a definition.
This is my geek self now. I have the book here, and so when I saw this was one of my aha moments. I didn't know what equilibrium was either, other than like somebody floating on the water. But it's defined as the supply of and demand for commodities always tends to move towards equilibrium. Okay, that sounds fairly interesting. At this theoretical point,
Theoretical.
which almost never occurs, market value, price, and cost are equal. And this is why our job is not that simple. And this is why our job is very valuable to our clients. They don't really understand this, but when we understand it and we can explain it to them, which we'll go into much depth in the PSA, I'm going to read it again. The supply of and demand for commodities always tend to move towards equilibrium. At this theoretical point that captured my attention, which almost never occurs, market value, price, and cost are equal. On page 37. Changed my perspective.
So, name the price, get it sold. We've talked about the appraisal words, we've talked about inventory. Developing your process is what we go into great detail with the pricing strategy, because we'll all do it a little differently, just like all the appraisers do it differently. But the most important thing is that you, as an individual, continue to do it the same way for each property. And then you can start grading yourself and looking backwards and saying, I did it right. Or you can even, if you don't have listings, you can still do it by pricing the properties that are active in the neighborhood and using your system and your process and your objective material, and then go back and grade yourself when it sells and then when you go on a listing in your neighborhood and you're the market expert, you could say, I was right within 98% of the sales price of all the homes in this neighborhood in the past year. You could do that without even having a listing and be that confident and competent.
What we're going to go over now is some of the things that
What do we have? Like
oh, there we go.
5 minutes?
Market maker. All right, so I got it. Sorry.
5 minutes.
It's taken now, but I couldn't resist because
It's huge. Yeah.
well,
Does it
and I
fit
just
on your car?
yeah, I have a Mack truck. Fits. Okay, so, but changing from a realtor to a market maker and being one and the same, I love the realtor brand, but I also love the verb of market making, and that definition of equilibrium shows why this is no easy task, along with many other things in our career. So we need to be able to verbalize our USP. Pricing is huge, and I'm glad to have this time with everybody here today. We do have
Pricing strategies, October 18, 9 to 5 at PWAR, if you're interested in getting a certification in pricing. And as Michael says, it's very complex. We're putting that price, the cost, the value, our feelings, obsolescence. There's so much to learn.
Hold on. Oh, okay. I got it. Step back.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Yes. Okay, so and here's another thing that we.
These are appraiser reports that we do in the properties, and we'll talk about that. That's another class that we'll put together, or you could come to pricing strategies. But it's important this is the crux of everything you've been working for. So make sure you attend.
Do you ever what do you do with unique properties?
Ooh,
Oh, that's a fun thing.
One of the
Said that.
ones.
The unique, I actually like it the best as an appraiser and a realtor, because you're not held back by, other than square footage, you know, and functionality. There's a lot more that you can do with a unique property. There's a lot more subjective information that you can put in there.
Let's talk after that. That's exciting.
So, how can a townhouse appraise for more than the highest sold in the subdivision? If matched pair, are you
So that's
talking?
one of those. So I came up with a little phrase called CYA. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. Know what's it stand for? Well, in this case, it stands for Call Your Appraiser. Which also has a dual meaning, because it will CYA also. So here's the thing. No matter where we go, we've been fortunate enough to go across the country teaching PSA, and we went to Montana a week or two ago. And call your local appraiser, because it depends is one of the big words that they use. And so you want to find out, which lawyers use that word a lot, we know that. But appraisers use it a lot also, and it's very relevant. So you have to learn. The reason you call them is because it does depend, and you want to find out what it depends upon. It would be silly and incompetent to realize it depends and then not know what it depends upon. And you can find that out by calling.
So this would be a good question to ask. How can a townhouse appraise for more than the highest sold in a subdivision. And just tell them you took a pricing class. And ask them, can I call you once in a while with a question? Like, people love to be the advisor, and they love to have interest in what they work so hard to do. And appraisers are kind of lonely sometimes.
So, yeah.
Give them
So
a call.
here's the deal. If anybody does this, asks this question, and gets answers, I do encourage you to call me. I have an answer that my trusted appraiser gave me. I'd like to know what your trusted appraiser gave you, and then we'll be able to learn together.
So in the class, we're going to look at things like this and things like this.
Yeah.
Adjustments. And when you put it into perspective, this is what we're doing. We're taking a bird's eye view. Now, doesn't that from an airplane, if you think like, I'm going to appraise this house against that house.
Yeah, so the one right there has a big highway in the backyard. Is that similar to the one that backs to woods?
Yeah.
Well, there'll be an adjustment for that if that's the best, most similar substitute.
We can talk about AVMs, everybody's favorite subject. And we use it to our advantage, the AVM, and we should be using it to our advantage because we have the analysis and we have the competence and the education and the experience, and there's no way that this marketplace is going to get along without us. So I just really encourage realtors to be market makers.
Market makers.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Now that you guys are done, name that price. We are back to name that tune. So thanks for being here today. You guys can stay and look at whether you're good at music. We got music makers, and now we have market makers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.